Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Gen 3 Raptor, the Ram TRX, and of course Doug Demuro, and the fact that he thinks that the new Gen 3 Raptor is great, but it's no Ram TRX. So in the first part of the video, we're basically going to talk about his little claim right there, whether or not he's actually correct. Then we're going to get into what my thoughts are as a Ram TRX owner on this new Gen 3 Raptor, and if it really doesn't stand up to the TRX. And so with all that being said, let's get into the video. So a quick disclaimer before I get into anything in this video. I want to mention that I don't actually have any beef with Doug Demuro. He is obviously the largest automotive reviewer on YouTube, really cool guy. And funny enough, when I worked at the dealership, I actually reached out to him and offered the opportunity to film some of the new Ram trucks when I worked there. And I literally had like no social media following at the time. And I think he had like 2 million subscribers or something. And he actually took the time to email me back. So like really cool guy, really like him. And again, I watch like all of his videos. That being said, I hate his video on the Gen 3 Raptor because again, he makes these conclusions about the truck, and to my knowledge, he didn't take that truck off-road because I didn't see any off-roading in that video, and I've never seen him do an off-road video with the Ram TRX, and so I don't think it's fair to make any conclusions about these trucks when you haven't taken them off-road. So, Mr. Doug Demuro, if you happen to watch this video, I have an offer for you. I currently own a 2021 Ram TRX. I have a Gen 3 Raptor with the 37 package on order. That'll be here soon. I invite you here to Utah to take both of them off-road. You can jump both of them. You can do a ton of crazy off-roading, and then I want you to make your conclusion on either of the trucks and decide if the Raptor really is inferior to the TRX after doing all of that. And now let's get into the rest of the video. Okay, so Raptor versus TRX. There's been a lot of talk back and forth, and here's some of the issues that I've seen back and forth with the talk. So first off, the thing that people always talk about is the engines. Everyone's like, oh, the new Raptor sucks because it doesn't have a supercharged V8. First off, Ford has already announced that they are going to be releasing a V8 version of the Raptor. It's probably going to be limited production, but they're still most likely going to do it. Now, aside from that, the twin-turbo V6 isn't bad, and it's actually really good for off-road use. And it's actually slightly better than the supercharged V8 that you have in the Ram TRX. And again, this is coming from a TRX owner. I love my truck. But here's the deal. First off, 702 horsepower, way too much for off-road use. Like, there is only a few points that I will ever go full throttle. Most of the time, partial throttle, don't even need the power. I feel like anything over 500 horsepower for off-road use is just complete overkill. Like, there's just not any places that you can really use that. And even on-road, like, there's barely any places that you can use it, right? Maybe when you're like going on a highway on-ramp, right? But again, it's just too much power. Whereas with the Raptor, it's the perfect amount, right? It might be a little bit under, like I said, 500 horsepower I feel like is perfect for an off-road Baja truck like that. But 450 horsepower is still more than adequate where you're actually going full throttle, and it's the perfect amount of power where you can just really use it for a lot of the trails that you're going to be doing with that particular type of truck. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the actual weight. So the Raptor is about 5,600 pounds roughly. The TRX, 6,300 pounds, and I don't think that's counting fuel or anything, so like fuel obviously will make both of them way more. But anyways, there's like a 700 pound weight difference between both the trucks. And all of that weight is pretty much over the front axle with the TRX, right? That extra weight. And that's because it has a supercharged 6.2 liter V8. And guess what? It harms its off-roading ability. When you're going at low speeds, it is not an issue whatsoever. But when you go at really high speeds, you get so much more compression with that front end compared to the Raptor, and it's just physics, right? Ram and Bilstein did an amazing job with the suspension and shocks on that truck. They absolutely killed it. But they can't get around physics, right? The front end of that truck just dips down so far, and it's something that I ran into initially with the truck before I got the aftermarket bumper that I have on it, with the front end just coming down. And I'll include a clip at like the end of this video where you guys can see my stock skid plate absolutely hammered. That didn't happen to my Raptor. My Raptor skid plate got some scratches, but it did not get like the massive dents that the TRX has, and that's because, again, when you're going high speeds, that front end just comes down so hard. And so yeah, that's a benefit with the Raptor. You have a lighter front end, and so when you're doing these high-speed trails, the front end doesn't come down nearly as hard, even though when you look up the ground clearance specs, they're not all that different between the trucks. It's like there's a difference between a ground clearance spec and when you're hauling down a trail 50, 60 miles an hour and you're having massive amounts of suspension compression. Now, aside from that, another downside to the Hellcat engine is the fuel range. Now, obviously, if you can afford a TRX, you can afford the fuel for it. But Something that's annoying about the truck is the fact that you have to fill up so often, and that kind of gets in the way with off-roading. Unless you have like a personal fuel tanker that you can take out to the off-road trails with you, you don't get a massive amount of off-road range. I have had so many times where I've averaged, 4.5, 5 miles per gallon off-road, which I'm not going to complain about, but I run out of fuel pretty fast, and so then you kind of have to cut the adventures a little bit short. Whereas with the Raptor, that twin turbo V6 gets so much better fuel, or better fuel economy rather. And so because of the better fuel economy, you have more fuel range. With my Gen 2, I was averaging like 100 miles more range. Like I was usually getting about 300 miles of range off-road, whereas the TRX seems like I've been getting around like 150, 200 miles of range, depending on how aggressively I drive, right? But yeah, that's another downside with that engine. Again, like I said, the Hellcat engine, I absolutely love it. I love the sound. It's great on road. Now let's kind of move from that to the suspension and shock area. This is where things are actually pretty even in my opinion, because I've actually had a chance to talk to some people that have developed both sets of shocks and everything, which I'm super grateful for. And obviously we have now the 5-link coil suspension on the new Raptor. And so from a suspension and shock perspective, they're very close. The live valve from Fox and the Black Hawk shocks from Bilstein are both absolutely amazing. They're really good at soaking things up. And then on top of that, when you're on road, they're actually, both sets are really smooth. And so yeah, both teams did an amazing job. And then having 5-link coil suspension is obviously the best thing to do for an off-road truck, because the back end stays nice and planted, so you have a lot of confidence with the truck, and it helps smooth things out. And so that's where things are actually pretty even with both of the trucks, so we're not going to spend too much time on that. Now, moving from that to tires, the TRX, you can only get 35s from the factory. This new Raptor, you can get 35s or 37s. And guess what? 37s might not give you as much travel, but they look a whole lot cooler. And then from an off-road perspective, they are better in certain situations, right? When you have more tire, it's going to smooth things out a little bit better. So you're giving up travel for a little bit better ride quality, and obviously a little bit more grip because it is a bigger tire. Now, that being said, suspension travel is another thing. So the TRX has 13 inches front and back with suspension travel, which is great for a stock truck. But the new Gen 3 Raptor, 14 inches up front, 15 inches in the rear with 35s. With 37s, 13 inches up front, 14.1 inches in the back. So even with the larger 37s, the new Gen 3 Raptor has as much travel as the Ram TRX. And if you have 35s, it has more travel than the Ram TRX. So what I'm seeing here from a spec perspective with this new Gen 3 Raptor, from with the off-roading stuff, is this truck has just as much, if not more, ground clearance than the TRX, again, depending on the tire setup that you get with the truck. It has more suspension travel, or the same amount of suspension travel. It has a lighter front end. It has shocks and suspension that are just as advanced as what you have on the TRX, so it's going to ride just as smooth. It's going to soak things up just as well. So what I'm seeing from an off-road perspective with this Raptor is you have a truck that is just as capable as the TRX, if not more capable, slightly, right? And then on top of that, when you're actually driving it, you're going to be able to do a little bit more, because again, you're not going to have that up and down motion with the front end because of the heavier engine and all that stuff. And so you can't just say that the Gen 3 Raptor is not as good as the TRX, because when you're looking at it from an off-road perspective, it's starting to look like this might be the superior option. And then on top of that, something else that's cool is with this new Gen 3 Raptor, there's so many different things you can customize. Obviously, the exhaust is a cool thing, but that isn't really necessarily going to help out the capability. But you can customize the steering with the Gen 3 Raptor. You can customize the dampers. You can obviously customize the drive mode as well. Now with the TRX, you can customize all of that, but you don't have like all the individual buttons that the new Gen 3 has. If you haven't seen that, go watch my Gen 3 review. You guys know what I'm talking about. So I think that's all pretty cool. So depending on the situation you're in off-road, you can just quickly like switch. So you can like, something that you can't necessarily do on the TRX because you'd have to like change drive modes or go into custom mode or something, is quickly switch one part of the truck. So like with the Raptor, if maybe you want the steering to be light for a corner, then you can go boom, steering mode, change the steering mode, and then it's light. Whereas the TRX, you have to go into the infotainment system, change it from the menu, or you have to change the drive mode, so it's not as accessible. So that's definitely another plus for the Raptor as well. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for at least this part of the video. And again, the point that I'm really trying to make with this video and with vehicles like this is you just can't make conclusions on these vehicles if you've only driven them on road, because that's only half the picture, right? The Raptor and the TRX are supposed to be these crazy capable off-road vehicles, and so if you're going to pick a winner, one or the other, you have to take them off-road, and then you can decide which one is the best, because right now what it's looking is the TRX is probably still going to beat the Raptor on-road because it's faster, it sounds better, and you know, it has that nicer luxury interior. But then the Raptor, from the specs, it sounds like it's going to beat the TRX off-road. So then it's not going to be obvious which one is the better pick, right? Depending on what you're going to use the truck for, right? That might determine it. If you're going to do more on-road driving, probably TRX. If you're going to do more off-road driving, probably Raptor. But again, if you're a car reviewer like Doug Demuro, you probably should take both of them off-road before you go to that conclusion, right? Oh, we've got Mr. Zipper right there, and then we've got the stock bumper, stock exhaust, all that kind of stuff chilling in here for right now. But here is our stock skid plate, so you guys can see completely hammered, and it's hard to see in camera, but that whole section right there all dented in. That's all dented on the end. This here on the top, not as much. But yeah, like it's completely like all caved in. That freaked him out. Look at him, he's like, what happened? But yeah, it's just like I said, all that bottoming out and everything. Obviously that's why you have skid plates. It protected something important from getting damaged, but it still happened, and I don't know what he's doing. But what are you doing, Zipper? He's not gonna answer. He answers to no one. Now that's gonna sum things up for today's video, going over Doug Demuro's, I guess, overview of the Gen 3 Raptor and why he is wrong with the Gen 3 Raptor. And again, like I said earlier in the video, Mr. Doug Demuro, I will have a Gen 3 pretty soon. I've got the TRX. You can take both of them off-road. And then that'd be a fun video for you to do. It'd be different than your normal reviews, right? Instead of just having your like around a few street corners, right? Some fun in the desert, trust me, worth it. But anyways, if you're stopping for the first time, please subscribe, and I'll see all of you in the next video.